In the heart of Ethiopia's Tigray region, a powerful and poignant cry is echoing. It is the voice of over 1 million internally displaced people whose lives have been suspended in a state of limbo since the devastating war of 2020 to 2022. Their message is simple, yet it carries the weight of years of suffering. YiAkle, which translates to "Enough is enough." This is not just a slogan, it is a profound declaration from a people who have endured unimaginable hardship. They are tired of living in makeshift camps, tired of depending on dwindling aid, and tired of being separated from the lands that hold their history, their memories, and their futures. The movement is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of prolonged adversity. The YiAkle movement has now galvanized a community pushed to its limits. For these displaced Tigrayans, the prospect of facing a 5th consecutive rainy season under the flimsy protection of a tent is honestly an unbearable thought. The rains in this part of the world are not gentle. They are torrential, turning the crowded camps into muddy, disease-ridden quagmires. The people have watched their children grow up knowing only the confines of a camp, their elders weaken without proper care, and their dignity erode with each passing day. Their peaceful protests are a desperate attempt to reclaim their lives and remind the world that their plight has not ended, even if a peace agreement was signed. They are demanding a return to normalcy, to the simple act of living in their own homes. The backdrop to this movement is one of profound loss. Many of the internally displaced people hail from Western Tigray, a territory that remains occupied by Amhara regional forces and the federal military. This area was the scene of what the United States State Department has described as ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity. For the displaced, returning home is not merely a matter of logistics. It is a fight for their identity and their right to exist in the place their families have inhabited for generations. The slogan YiAkle encapsulates their collective exhaustion with displacement, with hunger, and with the world's seeming indifference to their ongoing tragedy. It is a powerful, unified demand for justice and the restoration of their fundamental rights. The movement gained significant momentum on June 11, 2025, when thousands of internally displaced people marched through the streets of Mekelle, the regional capital. They carried banners with stark messages like "No 5th rainy season in tents" and "Implement the Pretoria Agreement." Now their procession was not one of anger, but of deep-seated resolve. They marched from the Martyrs Museum, a site of remembrance, to the office of the regional government, seeking answers and action. This public demonstration was a clear signal that their patience had run out. They were no longer willing to suffer in silence while their homes remained beyond their reach, and their peaceful but firm protest was designed to force the issue onto the national and international stage once and for all. The resolve of the displaced Tigrayans was put on full display earlier this year, from January 13th to 16th, 2025. In a bold and peaceful act of civil disobedience, thousands of internally displaced people occupied the very offices of the Tigray Interim Administration in Mekelle. They transformed the corridors of power into a space of protest, bringing their suffering directly to the doorstep of their leaders. Their presence was a quiet but powerful indictment of the inaction that has defined their lives for years. They were not seeking conflict or confrontation. They were simply seeking to be seen and heard by the officials elected to represent their interests. Their occupation was a plea for empathy and urgent intervention. Despite the gravity of their demonstration, the internally displaced people were met with a conspicuous silence. The president of the Tigray Interim Administration did not meet with the protesters who had gathered outside and inside his offices. This lack of engagement from their own regional leadership was a deeply disheartening blow for a community already feeling abandoned. It underscored a painful reality. While their suffering was immense, their calls for help seemed to fall on deaf ears. For the men, women, and children who had risked what little they had to make their voices heard, the absence of their leader felt like a profound betrayal of their trust and a dismissal of their desperate situation. The regional administration's position is complicated. Officials have stated that they are hamstrung, with an estimated 40% of Tigray's territory remaining under the control of outside forces. They point to past failures, such as an attempt in July 2023 to return 456 people to the Salemti district, which was thwarted due to severe security risks. While these challenges are real, they offer little comfort to the displaced. From the internally displaced people's perspective, these explanations sound like excuses for sustained inaction. They believe their leaders should be doing more to pressure the federal government and the international community to create the secure conditions necessary for their return. The administrative hurdles do not change the daily reality of hunger and hopelessness in the camps. The peaceful occupation and the subsequent marches are thus born from a deep-seated frustration that their plight is being caught in a web of political and administrative paralysis. The internally displaced people feel trapped between a regional government that claims it is powerless and a federal government that has failed to act on its promises. By taking their protests to the regional government's office, they were making a clear statement. Leadership must find a way to break the deadlock. They were demanding that their representatives become their champions, to fight for their cause relentlessly until every last displaced person could finally go home. Their message was unambiguous. Administrative challenges cannot be an excuse for human suffering. The core of the internally displaced people's demands rests on a single, crucial document: the Pretoria Peace Agreement. Signed in November 2022, this accord officially ended the brutal 2-year war and was hailed as a landmark step toward lasting peace and reconciliation in Ethiopia. A key pillar of this agreement was the commitment to facilitate the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of all internally displaced people to their homes. Crucially, the text places the primary responsibility for ensuring this safe return squarely on the shoulders of the Ethiopian federal government. This was the promise that gave millions of displaced Tigrayans a glimmer of hope after years of conflict and trauma. However, more than 2.5 years after the ink dried on that agreement, that promise remains largely unfulfilled. For the over 1 million Tigrayans still living in displacement, the words of the Pretoria Agreement ring hollow. The federal government, which pledged to protect them and restore constitutional order, has failed to create the secure conditions needed for their return to Western Tigray and other occupied areas. The Tigray People's Liberation Front has repeatedly accused the central government of dragging its feet and failing to uphold its end of the bargain. This perceived inaction is seen not just as a logistical failure, but as a fundamental breach of trust that jeopardizes the entire peace process. The humanitarian cost of this broken promise is staggering and continues to grow with each passing day. The internally displaced people are scattered across 99 makeshift camps, where conditions are dire. They face severe and persistent food shortages, leading to widespread hunger and malnutrition. Access to basic medical care is almost non-existent, turning preventable illnesses into death sentences. In one camp alone, the Hinsad Center in Shire, a horrifying report emerged that nearly 300 people had died in the 3 months leading up to June 2025. The primary causes were hunger and a lack of medical attention, with at least one death being recorded daily. This is not a sustainable existence. It is a slow-motion humanitarian catastrophe. This failure to implement a core component of the peace deal has profound implications. It not only perpetuates the suffering of the internally displaced people, but also undermines the very foundation of the peace that was so hard-won. A peace agreement without implementation is merely a piece of paper. The federal government's responsibility is not just to demobilize fighters, but to restore lives and communities. By failing to secure the return of displaced citizens to their homes in Western Tigray, the government is failing a critical test of its commitment to a unified and stable Ethiopia. The internally displaced people's protest is a desperate plea for the government to honor its word before more lives are tragically and needlessly lost. The powerful YiAkle movement is no longer confined to the dusty camps and streets of Tigray. The cries for justice have crossed borders and oceans, igniting a global movement of solidarity. The vast Tigrayan diaspora, along with human rights advocates and concerned citizens around the world, has taken up the cause. They are organizing and amplifying the voices of the displaced, ensuring that their plight is not forgotten on the international stage. Regular demonstrations are now being held in major cities across North America, Europe, and beyond, from Washington, D.C. to Geneva, Switzerland. This global chorus is united by a single, urgent demand: end the prolonged displacement and implement the Pretoria Agreement now. This international mobilization is creating crucial pressure on world leaders and international bodies. Protests scheduled for June 18th to 20th 2025, in both YiAkle and Geneva, are designed to coincide with meetings of international policymakers, bringing the issue directly to their attention. The diaspora is using social media, petitions, and direct advocacy to highlight the humanitarian crisis and the failure to uphold the terms of the peace deal. They are reminding the global community that peace is more than the absence of war. It is the presence of justice, security, and the right to a dignified life. This external pressure is vital, as it can encourage diplomatic engagement and hold the Ethiopian federal government accountable for its commitments. Amid the despair, there is a resilient and unwavering hope. This hope is visible in the determined faces of the protesters in YiAkle and in the passionate advocacy of their supporters worldwide. It is a hope fueled by unity and a shared belief in the fundamental right to a home. The YiAkle movement has demonstrated the incredible power of a community that refuses to be silenced. They have transformed their suffering into a catalyst for change, reminding everyone that their struggle is a struggle for basic human dignity. Their unity is their greatest strength, sending a clear message that they will not rest until justice is served and their communities are restored. The path forward is clear, and the need for action is urgent. The Ethiopian federal government must fulfill its obligations under the Pretoria Agreement without further delay. It must work with regional and international partners to ensure the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of all internally displaced people. The international community must move beyond expressions of concern and take concrete steps to support this process. The rainy season is here, and another day spent in a tent is another day of injustice. The world must listen to the cry of YiAkle. It is time to end the suffering, to honor the promises of peace, and to finally bring the people of Tigray home.